The morning sun had barely cleared the skyline over Richmond County when the courthouse doors began to creak open, and the faint hum of traffic outside collided with the low murmur of voices inside. It was a day that would seem ordinary to anyone passing by, yet within these walls, tension simmered like water on the verge of boiling. Reporters lined the narrow corridors, cameras balanced precariously in hands already jittery with anticipation. The chatter of news crews mixed with the clicking of heels on polished stone floors, each step echoing in the cavernous entryway. Inside, deputies attempted to corral the growing crowd, a mix of curious locals, journalists, and family members. Their stern expressions did little to calm the energy in the air, which vibrated with the expectation of a climax no one could predict. The case was widely covered in local news. A high-profile incident involving a police dog, a mishandled arrest, and an allegation that had split the town in two. Some claimed the officer had done everything correctly, others whispered that the system had failed. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion, but only a few knew the full story. Amid this chaos walked 6-year-old Riley Dawson, gripping her aunt's hand tightly. She clutched a worn stuffed fox, its fur matted from years of companionship, as if it were her shield against the world. Her small stature and tentative movements contrasted sharply with the towering presence of officers, reporters, and the looming public gallery. Riley's wide brown eyes darted from one face to another, taking in the black robes of the judge, the polished shoes of the attorneys, and most of all, the presence that made her knees quiver. K9 Ranger, a German shepherd as disciplined as he was imposing. Ranger sat calmly beside the defense table, his harness gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. His trained posture radiated authority, his ears twitching slightly as though listening to voices only he could hear. To the casual observer, he was just another piece of evidence, a symbol of law and order. But to Riley, he was something different, something remembered, something that belonged to a night she could never forget, a night that had haunted her dreams and fueled a quiet fear she had carried for years. The courtroom itself seemed to shrink when Riley entered. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators, their faces a mix of curiosity, impatience, and skepticism. The judge, a tall man with a deep voice that rarely wavered, peered over his glasses at the small girl. "Riley Dawson, please approach the stand," he instructed, his tone gentle but firm. A hush fell over the room, so complete that even the scribbling of reporters' pens seemed to pause. Riley's aunt leaned down, whispering softly, "You can do this, sweetie. Just tell the truth." Riley nodded, though her lips trembled. Her eyes remained fixed on Ranger, who watched her as though he remembered more than anyone in the courtroom. The dog's gaze was unnervingly steady, filled with an intelligence that transcended ordinary training. Riley swallowed hard and took a tentative step forward, feeling every eye in the room press down upon her. The defense attorney, a man with a carefully rehearsed smirk, leaned back in his chair. He had expected a shaky, frightened child, a witness whose presence would have no bearing on the case. This was part of his strategy: present the child, allow the jury to smile and pity her, then dismiss her as irrelevant. But as Riley took another step, her small frame moving closer to Ranger, his confidence faltered. There was something in the way she carried herself, not bravado, not arrogance, but a quiet resolve that unsettled him. Whispers began to ripple through the courtroom. Reporters nudged one another, cameras raised to capture every movement. Jurors shifted in their seats, their curiosity piqued. Deputies exchanged glances, nodding that Ranger, despite his usual calm demeanor, appeared different today. His ears twitched, his head tilted slightly, and his body leaned forward ever so subtly. It was not an aggressive stance. It was recognition. Riley took another step, drawing closer to the dog, her tiny hand clutching the stuffed fox like a talisman. "It's okay," she whispered under her breath, as if speaking to someone only she could see. Ranger's nose twitched. The dog's eyes softened, and he let out a quiet whine that only Riley could hear. The reaction was instantaneous and undeniable. Something that had been dormant for years, the memory of that night, resurfaced in a way that no adult in the room could understand, but everyone could sense. The judge watched closely, his brow furrowing in mild concern. "Do you feel safe here, Riley?" he asked. She nodded slowly, never taking her eyes off Ranger. The child's courage in the face of such a commanding presence was remarkable. Even the defense attorney leaned forward slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. How could a 6-year-old, a child everyone assumed irrelevant, hold such power in a single glance and a whisper? Her testimony had not yet begun, yet the courtroom seemed to shift around her. The tension that had hung like a fog began to thicken, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The bailiff, a seasoned officer who had seen thousands of hearings, took a half-step back, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Ranger shifted in his seat, his instincts kicking in. He was trained to obey, to serve, to protect, but he was not trained for this. A reunion with a memory, a bond with a child who remembered more than anyone expected. Riley's aunt gently squeezed her hand. "Just tell the truth," she whispered again. Riley took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling. Then slowly she stepped closer still until she was only a few feet from Ranger. The dog leaned in slightly, his powerful body tense but controlled. The judge's eyes flicked between the child and the dog, sensing the unspoken connection. The jury sat forward, reporters held their breath, and the room seemed suspended in time. "Do you remember me?" Riley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ranger's ears twitched, and he let out a low, soft whine, his nose brushing the edge of the table. It was a sound that carried more weight than words could convey. The defense attorney's smirk faltered completely. The handler, normally composed, tightened his grip on the leash. Even seasoned law enforcement officers leaned closer, sensing something vital was about to be revealed. Every eye in the room focused on the unusual scene. A 6-year-old girl and a German shepherd, locked in a moment of recognition that defied explanation. It was as if the dog remembered her fear, her vulnerability, and her truth, while the adults around them struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling the start of formal proceedings, yet no one moved. The room was captivated, held hostage by a silent understanding between child and animal. Riley's voice grew steadier. "You were there that night, you tried to help me." The courtroom fell utterly silent. Even the hum of cameras seemed to pause. Ranger shifted again, nudging slightly toward her, refusing to be pulled back. The handler's face drained of color. The defense attorney's notes fell forgotten to the floor. It was clear to everyone that this small child, assumed powerless and timid, held a truth that no report, no official statement, and no adult testimony had yet uncovered. And in that moment, the case itself, the entire narrative of guilt, innocence, and blame, suddenly hung in the balance. The audience in the courtroom, the jurors, the attorneys, and even the officers realized something fundamental. The story had shifted. Not by lawyers, not by evidence charts, but by a child's courage and a loyal dog's memory. What had seemed like an ordinary morning in Richmond County was now the first step toward uncovering a truth that had been hidden, unnoticed, and underestimated for far too long. Riley took one more step forward, her small hand brushing Ranger's muzzle. The German shepherd pressed closer, responding to her touch with a gentleness that contradicted his usual authority. The judge leaned forward, intrigued and cautious. He had presided over hundreds of trials, yet nothing like this had ever occurred before. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Something had shifted, something unspoken but powerful, and it had nothing to do with testimony, law, or procedure. It had to do with memory, trust, and courage. For Riley, stepping into the courtroom had been terrifying. For Ranger, sitting beside the defense table had been routine. But together, in that charged moment, they created a silent storm that could not be ignored. Every adult in the room, from the judge to the reporters to the jurors, sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. This was not merely a trial. It was a reckoning. And it all began with a 6-year-old girl confronting a police dog and finding a truth no one else had yet dared to see. The courtroom remained frozen, every pair of eyes locked on Riley and Ranger. The small girl's gaze did not waver. She had found the courage she didn't know she possessed, and the courtroom could feel it radiating from her tiny frame. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, carried an authority that seemed impossible for someone her age. "You tried to help me," she repeated, a note of certainty in her tone. Ranger's ears flicked forward, his body leaning subtly toward her, as if he understood her words in a way no human could. The defense attorney's confident smirk faltered for the first time that morning. He had expected a timid child, one who would fumble over words, perhaps cry under the weight of the courtroom's attention. Instead, Riley's presence commanded the room. Jurors shifted in their seats, leaning forward instinctively, drawn by a story that wasn't even fully told. The bailiffs exchanged uneasy glances. Even they had never witnessed a courtroom so utterly captivated by a 6-year-old witness. Cameras clicked, capturing every tremble, every movement, yet none could capture the unspoken tension that hummed through the air. Riley's aunt, seated just behind the witness stand, bit her lip and squeezed her own hands tightly. She had known Riley was brave, but not like this. To stand here, facing a trained police dog, a room full of adults, and a case that had divided the town, this was something she had never imagined. She whispered a quiet prayer under her breath, praying the child could navigate the next few minutes without fear overwhelming her. But Riley's resolve did not falter. The judge, a man used to commanding authority with a single glance or word, leaned forward on his bench, observing the unusual tableau before him. "Riley," he said softly, his voice measured, "tell the court what happened that night. Begin at the start." The words were simple, procedural, yet in this room, under these circumstances, they carried immense weight. Riley drew in a breath, her small chest rising and falling, and began. "I was hiding," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make everyone lean closer. "I didn't know where to go. There were shouting voices and shadows. I saw him, the man who was supposed to be caught, but I was scared and I ran. Ranger, he was there. He wasn't chasing him, he was trying to get to me." The courtroom gasped softly. Ranger's ears twitched again, his gaze fixed firmly on Riley. The handler stiffened, confusion and concern mingling across his face. The defense attorney immediately interjected, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Objection, Your Honor. The child is confused. The dog couldn't have acted in such a way." The judge raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Let the child speak," he said. "Her testimony is valid and she is capable of recounting what she saw." The murmurs that had begun among spectators quieted. Everyone present realized that this was no ordinary testimony. Riley wasn't merely a witness. She was about to challenge the narrative that had been presented for months. Riley swallowed hard, gripping her stuffed fox tightly. "He pulled away from the man," she continued, "and tried to come to me. He barked, but not like he was angry. He barked like he wanted to protect me." The room held its collective breath. Deputies glanced at each other, suddenly aware that the dog's behavior, once assumed routine, might be key to the entire case. Ranger shifted slightly, taking a cautious step closer to Riley, ignoring the tug on his leash from his handler. His loyalty, his instinct was clear. Whispers began to spread among the audience. Reporters scribbled rapidly in notebooks, their eyes flicking between Riley and the dog. The jurors' expressions shifted from polite attention to rapt focus, the kind of focus that precedes revelation. The prosecution leaned forward, their faces intent, as if trying to read the unspoken connection between child and animal. Every adult present sensed it. The story was about to pivot in a way no one had anticipated. The defense attorney's composure wavered. He had prepared for lies, for exaggeration, for hesitation. He had not prepared for truth delivered with this kind of clarity from the mouth of a 6-year-old. He whispered to his client, but Ranger did not move. The dog's body language betrayed nothing but recognition and focus. For years, Ranger had been trained to obey commands, to respond to threats, to follow orders without hesitation. And yet now, instinct overrode training. The courtroom watched, captivated, as the animal chose the child's side without question. The judge cleared his throat. "Riley, explain what you mean. How do you know the dog tried to help you?" The girl's brown eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She lifted the stuffed fox and clutched it to her chest. Because I remember. I was hiding and he barked, but not at me. He barked at the man who was trying to hurt me. He pulled away from the officer he tried to reach me. He saved me that night." Her words hung in the air like a fragile bridge between chaos and clarity. Ranger let out a low whine, his head lowering to the floor as though acknowledging her memory. The bailiff stepped back instinctively. The dog's reaction was subtle yet profound, enough to make everyone present reconsider the reports filed weeks ago. What had been written, what had been recorded as fact, might no longer be accurate. The audience could feel the fragility of the narrative unraveling, thread by thread, with a 6-year-old's words and a dog's instinct. The courtroom atmosphere grew tense, almost electric. The defense attorney's notes lay abandoned, a useless barrier against a force he could not control. The prosecution leaned forward, whispering to each other, trying to map this revelation onto the evidence they had already reviewed. Even the reporters, trained to remain detached, felt the surge of raw, unscripted truth. It was rare, almost mythical, that a single testimony could pivot an entire case, and rarer still that the witness was a child facing an intimidating police dog. Riley's aunt reached for her hand, trembling slightly. She had tried to prepare her niece for the courtroom, to tell her it would be safe, that adults would handle everything. But no preparation could have conveyed the weight of being the center of attention in a room filled with authority, expectation, and tension. Yet Riley's resolve did not falter. She stepped closer to Ranger, her small hand brushing the fur of his muzzle, the dog responding with a quiet nudge. In that moment, they shared a connection that transcended fear, power, and even language. The judge studied the child carefully, aware that the courtroom was on the edge of a revelation. "Riley, please continue. Tell us what you saw in detail." She nodded, drawing in a deep breath, her voice small but unwavering. "I was hiding behind the trash bins near the alley. I heard yelling, I saw shadows move, and Ranger, he came near me. He barked, but not like he was chasing anyone. He barked like he wanted to help. He was trying to save me." The room went utterly silent. The handler, for the first time, looked uncertain. Ranger did not respond to his leash. His usually obedient dog now refused to follow commands, acknowledging only Riley. Jurors leaned forward, eyebrows raised, scribes paused, and the murmuring spectators went quiet. A subtle, yet undeniable shift had occurred. The case was no longer a matter of cold facts or pre-written statements. It had become a story of memory, courage, and instinct. A story that a 6-year-old girl and a German shepherd were writing in real time. Riley paused, breathing unevenly yet steady enough to convey the authority of truth. "He tried to reach me, but the man pulled him back. I think the officer didn't want anyone to know what happened, but Ranger, he remembers me, and I remember him." Ranger tilted his head, letting out a soft, almost mournful whine, his gaze never leaving her. The courtroom was collectively holding its breath, caught in a moment that would soon redefine the entire case. Even seasoned officers and lawyers felt a chill. They had been trained to rely on procedure, reports, and evidence, yet here was evidence no paperwork could capture, a living, breathing connection between witness and K9, unmediated by protocol. The truth seemed delicate, almost ephemeral, and yet stronger than anything that had been presented before. The small girl was the catalyst, the dog was the silent witness. Together, they were poised to rewrite the story everyone thought they already knew. The judge adjusted his glasses, observing the profound shift in the courtroom. "We will proceed carefully," he said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. He motioned for the bailiffs to remain alert but restrained. Reporters whispered among themselves, unable to conceal excitement. The jurors leaned forward, captivated by an unfolding narrative far beyond what they had expected. The dog remained by Riley's side, refusing to budge, as if protecting the fragile truth forming in real time. Riley's words had achieved something extraordinary. They had arrested not just attention but belief. She was no longer merely a witness. She had become the linchpin of a revelation that could topple preconceived narratives, undermine authority, and reveal hidden truths. Ranger, instinctive and loyal, mirrored her courage in silent affirmation. The courtroom, once a space of rigid procedure and predictable statements, had become a stage for truth in its rawest, most compelling form. And in that moment, the entire county courthouse realized that what had begun as an ordinary morning, a routine hearing with routine expectations, was about to transform into something far greater. The stage was set for revelations no one had anticipated. The next steps, the questions yet to be asked, and the answers yet to emerge would not just determine the outcome of a case. They would uncover a hidden truth, long ignored, revealed by a 6-year-old girl and a loyal police dog whose memory refused to fade. The courtroom remained in stunned silence, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and rattles the soul. Riley Dawson stood just a few feet from Ranger, her tiny hands gripping her stuffed fox so tightly the fabric creased, her knuckles white. The dog, trained for obedience, for authority, and for public demonstration, did something no one had ever seen before. He leaned closer to her, tilting his head as if listening not to her words but to something deeper, an unspoken memory, a recognition that defied logic or procedure. Ranger's ears twitched, his powerful body subtly lowering, his gaze locked onto Riley with an intensity that froze everyone in place. The handler tensed beside him, gripping the leash like it was a lifeline, but Ranger refused to respond. For years, the dog had followed orders without hesitation, an embodiment of precision, loyalty, and control. Today, however, instinct had overridden training. The canine's allegiance had shifted in an instant, and the courtroom felt the seismic weight of the unspoken truth hanging in the air. Riley's voice, though small, grew more confident. "You tried to save me," she whispered again. Ranger let out a soft, plaintive whine, his nose brushing slightly against her leg. The sound, gentle yet commanding, carried through the courtroom and wrapped around the hearts of those present. Deputies leaned closer, exchanging uneasy glances. Even the judge, who had presided over thousands of cases, felt a shiver run down his spine. Something extraordinary was happening, something that had nothing to do with legal argument and everything to do with memory, courage, and loyalty. The defense attorney, who had been confidently poised just moments before, sat frozen, the practiced smirk fading from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. For once, he could not command the room with rhetoric or feigned authority. His client, the dog's handler, shifted uneasily, tugging gently on Ranger's leash in a vain attempt to regain control. But Ranger did not budge. The German shepherd, trained to obey, had chosen Riley over command, instinct over protocol. In that instant, the scales of perception tilted dramatically in favor of the child. Whispers spread like wildfire. Reporters scribbled feverishly, cameras flashing intermittently, but even they seemed uncertain how to capture the subtle power of the moment. The jurors leaned forward, eyes wide, jaws clenched in disbelief. They had come expecting testimony, evidence, perhaps a stirring statement from an adult. Instead, they were witnessing the raw and unfiltered bond between a child and a dog, one that carried more truth than any written report, more authority than any sworn statement. The entire courtroom felt suspended in the gravity of a revelation that had no precedent. Riley's aunt, seated nearby, swallowed nervously, her hand trembling on her lap. She had always known her niece possessed remarkable courage for her age, but no amount of imagination could have prepared her for this. Her little girl, standing alone in front of authority figures, reporters, and a massive German shepherd, exuded a quiet power that belied her small stature. She wasn't just telling a story. She was reclaiming a narrative, one memory at a time, and the courtroom was compelled to listen. "Riley," the judge said, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity, "please describe exactly what happened that night." The request seemed ordinary, procedural, but the air was anything but ordinary. Riley inhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling with a mixture of fear and determination. "I was hiding," she began, "behind the dumpsters by the alley. I saw the shadows of people running and I heard shouting. Ranger, he was there. He barked, but not like he was chasing anyone. He barked like he was trying to help me." The words, innocent and precise, seemed to reverberate off the walls, etching themselves into the minds of everyone present. Ranger's posture shifted once more. He took a small, deliberate step closer to Riley, ignoring his handler's tug on the leash. The dog's reaction was subtle, yet undeniable. The handler's face paled as he realized the dog was no longer responding to authority. Ranger's instincts had guided him to the child, and he would not be dissuaded. The courtroom felt the tension tighten, almost as though the walls themselves were leaning in to witness the unfolding revelation. The prosecution leaned forward, whispering among themselves, quickly cross-referencing the child's account with the previously submitted reports. Her description of the dog's behavior contradicted the official narrative. Ranger had not been pursuing a suspect as the report claimed. He had been trying to reach Riley. The discrepancy was glaring and the implications monumental. What had been considered a routine case of police procedure now hinted at potential misconduct, at a narrative manipulated by human fear and error rather than guided by justice. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Spectators whispered urgently, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The reporters' pens flew across notebooks, cameras clicked relentlessly, and jurors shifted uneasily in their seats. For everyone in that room, the story had changed. The small, quiet girl who had seemed inconsequential at the start was now at the center of a revelation that challenged everything they had been told. She was rewriting history with words no adult had dared speak aloud. Riley's voice gained strength, fueled by the dog's unwavering attention. He pulled away from the man who was supposed to be caught. He tried to reach me. He barked to protect me, not to attack. He remembered me. Ranger let out another whine, low and mournful, his powerful body leaning slightly into her, a silent confirmation of her words. The courtroom collectively held its breath, recognizing that a truth long buried was rising to the surface. The dog, loyal and instinctive, had become the living witness to events that no paperwork could fully capture. The defense attorney finally spoke, though his voice trembled with unease. "Your Honor, I object. The child is mistaken. The dog could not have acted in such a manner." The judge raised a hand, cutting him off. "The objection is noted. However, the child's testimony will continue. Let her explain in her own words." The calm, decisive tone carried authority, but even the judge could not have anticipated the impact Riley's next words would have on the room. Riley took a deep breath, her small frame trembling yet her voice strong. "I remember. I was scared. I didn't know where to go. Ranger, he tried to get to me, but the man pulled him back. I know he remembers now, too. He remembers me." The words were simple, yet they carried weight far beyond the vocabulary of a 6-year-old. They spoke of memory, loyalty, and the quiet courage of both child and animal. The courtroom felt the gravity settle like a tangible force, pressing down on everyone present. Ranger shifted again, his head lowering slightly, a soft whine escaping as he nudged her gently. The child's testimony and the dog's response created a silent harmony that no human voice could rival. Deputies glanced at one another, alarmed by the discrepancy between the dog's behavior and the handler's report. Prosecutors exchanged quick, urgent whispers, realizing that the case was no longer about the events on paper, but about the living truth unfolding before them. Even the jurors, trained to evaluate evidence with detachment, leaned in. Their focus was riveted on Riley, on Ranger, on the subtle signals that betrayed years of hidden events. The audience understood collectively that this moment transcended legal procedure. It was a revelation, delivered by a child too small to command attention by any ordinary measure, accompanied by a dog whose loyalty spoke louder than any testimony. Riley's aunt could hardly contain her tears. She watched her niece, awe and pride mingling with fear for the intensity of what was happening. She knew Riley's memory was vivid, shaped by years of fear and trauma, yet she had never anticipated that her recollection would carry the weight of undeniable proof. And she knew, instinctively, that Ranger's behavior, the dog's refusal to obey, his insistence on moving closer to the child, was validation in a way words alone could never achieve. The judge adjusted his glasses, his gaze sharp and measured, yet his mind raced with the implications. "This is highly unusual," he murmured, almost to himself. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation. The handler's confidence had evaporated, replaced by tension and panic. Ranger, obedient in all other circumstances, had defied every command and stood by the child, insisting, through instinct and memory, that the truth be revealed. Riley's small hand reached out tentatively, brushing Ranger's muzzle. The dog pressed closer, leaning into her touch. In that simple act, a bond was confirmed, a narrative challenged, and a truth hinted at, waiting to be fully uncovered. Every adult in the courtroom felt it, an undeniable awareness that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The ordinary morning, the predictable case, had transformed into a living story of memory, courage, and revelation, with a 6-year-old girl and a German shepherd at its center. And in that moment, the foundation of the case began to tremble. Reports, statements, and claims, all built on authority and procedure, were no match for the unvarnished truth emerging from Riley's memory and Ranger's instinct. The room seemed to lean closer, caught between disbelief and wonder, as if the very air conspired to ensure that this revelation could not be ignored. The quiet child and the loyal dog were about to change everything. Riley Dawson stood only a few feet from Ranger, her small frame trembling slightly, yet her eyes shone with a clarity and purpose that drew every gaze in the courtroom. The German shepherd's massive head tilted, ears forward, and a soft whine escaped his throat. It was not fear, nor obedience, but recognition, a bond that transcended commands and reports, a memory reaching across years to confirm what Riley alone had endured. Every adult present felt the weight of that moment, a quiet revelation delivered with innocence and power that shook the room to its core. The judge leaned forward, gripping the edge of his bench. "Riley," he said, his voice calm but steady, "tell the court exactly what you saw that night." The simplicity of the question belied the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. Riley took a slow, deliberate breath, clutching her stuffed fox as though it could shield her from the intimidating authority surrounding her. But she did not shrink. She stepped forward just a little more, closing the distance between herself and the dog who had been her unseen guardian. I was hiding," Riley began, her voice quivering only slightly, but it carried in the still courtroom. "Behind the dumpsters near the alley, I heard shouting, I saw shadows moving, and then Ranger, he was there. He barked, but not like he was chasing anyone. He barked at the man who was supposed to hurt me. He tried to reach me, but the officer pulled him back." Her small voice faltered as she struggled to describe the memory, yet the courtroom hung on every word. The child's honesty created a ripple, a vibration that unsettled everyone who thought they understood the events of that night. Ranger shifted, a subtle movement yet full of significance. He lowered his head slightly, pawing gently at the ground. The handler tugged on the leash, trying to regain control, but Ranger refused to move back. The courtroom collectively gasped, the reaction instant and visceral. The dog, trained for discipline and obedience, had chosen instinct and loyalty over authority. Every adult in the room, lawyers, deputies, jurors, felt the tremor of revelation. The child's testimony and the dog's reaction combined to create evidence that no piece of paper could convey. The defense attorney's hand shook slightly as he reached for his notes. "Your Honor, I object. This is speculation. The child's memory is unreliable." His voice, usually commanding, lacked its usual confidence. The judge held up a hand, silencing him. "Let the child speak. Her testimony is relevant. Continue, Riley." The courtroom went quiet again. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the small girl, and every ear strained to catch her next word. She was about to dismantle months of official reports and testimony, with nothing but her memory and courage. Riley swallowed hard and continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I remember I was scared. I didn't know where to go. Ranger tried to help me. He barked to protect me, not to attack anyone. He tried to get to me, but the officer held him back. He didn't want anyone to know what really happened." The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence where even the faintest sound, the shuffle of papers, a pen dropping, sounded like a shout. The weight of truth, raw and unfiltered, pressed down on every adult in the room. The jurors leaned forward, some whispering to each other, some just staring, unable to fully process the child's words. The prosecution exchanged quick glances, realizing that the case was no longer about hearsay or procedural evidence. The dog's behavior, matched with Riley's testimony, created a new narrative, one that challenged the reports filed by the officer and the assumptions that had dominated public discussion. Ranger's instincts and Riley's memory were converging into proof that no adult testimony could match. Even the spectators, accustomed to courtroom dramas and dramatic testimonies, felt a shiver run down their spines. Cameras clicked, capturing every nuance, but the photographs could not convey the gravity of the moment. The entire room was suspended in tension, caught between disbelief and awe. The handler tugged again on Ranger's leash, his face pale and strained. He's just confused," he muttered, trying to rationalize the dog's behavior, but Ranger would not budge. His loyalty was undeniable, and his focus on Riley left no room for doubt. Riley took another step forward, her small hand reaching tentatively toward Ranger's massive head. The dog pressed closer, allowing her touch but remaining alert, protective, and unwavering. "He remembers me," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "He remembers what happened. He tried to save me. He tried to help me. He wasn't chasing anyone, he was protecting me." Her words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity. The courtroom felt the weight of years of misunderstanding and misreporting settle around them, as if the truth itself had been waiting for this precise moment. The defense attorney's confident posture cracked completely. He whispered urgently to his client, the handler, but Ranger ignored the leash. The German shepherd's actions were irrefutable. He had chosen Riley, loyalty over authority, memory over command. For the first time in his career, the attorney realized he could not control this narrative. The child had become the center of truth, and the dog had become the living embodiment of it. The entire courtroom sensed that nothing from this point forward could be assumed as settled. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Riley, I understand this may be frightening, but I need you to tell us everything you remember," he said. The calm, steady tone was meant to reassure, yet it carried the unspoken weight of authority and anticipation. Riley nodded, taking a deep breath. She could feel Ranger's warmth and quiet presence nearby, and it gave her courage. She was ready. The courtroom, which had seemed so imposing moments ago, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next revelation. Riley's aunt, seated close by, whispered softly, "You're doing so well, sweetie. Just tell them." Riley nodded again. Her small hand rested on Ranger's paw. The dog's warmth and steady breathing were a reminder of what had happened that night, a memory she had tried to bury, now resurfacing in a courtroom full of witnesses. Every adult in the room felt the power of the moment. They were not witnessing testimony. They were witnessing a revelation, a moment when the smallest voice demanded to be heard, and the most disciplined creature chose to acknowledge it. "Ranger pulled me close," Riley continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "He barked at the man who was supposed to hurt me. He wanted to get me, but he was held back. I know he remembers. I know he tried to help me." The courtroom exhaled collectively, though no one could truly release the tension that had built. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves, reporters scribbled furiously, and jurors leaned forward in shock and awe. This was no ordinary testimony. It was a living truth being demonstrated in real time, confirmed by instinct and memory. Ranger shifted his massive body again, leaning protectively toward Riley. The dog's reaction was undeniable, and the courtroom collectively recognized the implications. Reports filed by the officer, the claims made in earlier testimony, all of it now seemed uncertain. Ranger's instinct, guided by memory and loyalty, contradicted months of official narrative. The courtroom, once a theater of procedure and expected decorum, had become a stage for revelation that no one had anticipated. Every adult present felt it. The story they thought they knew was unraveling in front of them. Riley's final words, simple but precise, carried a weight that no document could replicate. "He remembers me. He tried to help me. He was protecting me. He was never chasing anyone." The German shepherd pressed even closer, his massive head resting near her tiny shoulder. The child's small voice had revealed a truth that had been hidden, overlooked, or misrepresented. The courtroom felt the gravity of it all, the intertwining of human error, instinct, memory, and courage. No one would leave this room unchanged. The judge adjusted his glasses, looking from Riley to Ranger and then to the handler. The handler's face was pale, strained, and tense. Ranger's behavior had confirmed the child's words, and the implications were profound. The courtroom had moved beyond simple observation. They were now witnesses to a truth that defied authority, expectation, and human control. The smallest witness, backed by the loyalty of a trained police dog, had shifted the balance of power, and no one could predict how the narrative would unfold from here. Riley's aunt wept quietly, her hands clasped over her mouth. She understood that her niece's courage, combined with Ranger's instinct, was unraveling a carefully constructed story. Every adult in the courtroom recognized the gravity. They were watching memory and loyalty confront authority and procedure, and the truth, long hidden, was breaking through. The moment hung suspended, delicate yet unstoppable, a quiet storm threatening to upend everything the room had accepted as fact. And in that charged silence, Riley realized something profound. Her words, her memory, and Ranger's response were a force no adult had anticipated. She was small, she was young, but her courage had illuminated a hidden truth. The courtroom, bound by decorum, procedure, and expectation, could no longer ignore what was happening. The next steps would reveal even more, and everyone sensed it. The moment was far from over. It was only the beginning. Riley Dawson's small fingers gripped her stuffed fox tighter as the courtroom settled into an expectant hush. Every pair of eyes was on her, but she didn't flinch. The German shepherd, Ranger, remained by her side, massive and calm, his gaze unwavering. The dog's silent attention gave her the courage she needed to recount what had been buried for so long. She drew a deep breath, swallowing fear with determination. "I remember it all," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. The courtroom, already tense, leaned in as though trying to catch every fragment of truth she would reveal. "I was hiding behind the dumpsters," she began, her eyes glancing toward the gallery as if the shadows of that night still lingered. "I saw the man who was supposed to be caught. He was big and scary, and he was shouting. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I ran because I was scared, and then I thought no one would find me." Her words hung in the air, raw and unembellished, carrying the weight of a trauma that had remained unspoken until this very moment. Ranger shifted slightly, pawing the ground and letting out a low whine. The sound was gentle but commanding, as if confirming the truth of Riley's account. The handler tugged at his leash nervously, but Ranger ignored him completely. The courtroom collectively noticed the discrepancy, the dog's instinct and Riley's memory aligning perfectly, contradicting every report that had been filed. Whispers rippled through spectators and reporters alike. The jurors leaned forward, sensing that the narrative they had been presented was being rewritten before their very eyes. Riley continued, her voice steadying. "Ranger wasn't chasing the man. He tried to get to me. He barked at the man who was coming toward me, but he wasn't attacking. He was trying to help me. He wanted to protect me, but the officer pulled him back." Her small hands gestured subtly toward Ranger, and the dog leaned closer, pressing gently into her side. The connection between child and animal was undeniable, a living confirmation of the story she was unfolding. The defense attorney's face was a mix of disbelief and panic. He had prepared for lies, for hesitation, for confusion, but not for clarity, courage, and living proof. He whispered to his client, the handler, who now looked pale and cornered. Ranger's reaction had stripped away authority, exposing the possibility of a falsified account. The prosecution exchanged urgent glances, realizing that what Riley was saying could unravel months of official narrative, and that the dog's instinct was now the most compelling evidence in the courtroom. Riley's aunt clasped her hands over her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. She had hoped for safety for her niece, but she had never imagined the depth of what Riley was about to reveal. The child's voice, though small, resonated across the courtroom, each word a revelation. "He remembered me," she whispered, nodding toward Ranger. "He tried to reach me, and I think he remembers now. He wanted to save me that night." Ranger whined again softly, nudging her leg in a gesture that seemed almost protective, almost grateful. The judge, sensing the gravity, leaned forward. "Riley, tell us everything you can remember about that night. Be as detailed as you can." The room held its collective breath. Riley closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the terror, the shadows, the fear, and the unexpected comfort she had felt from Ranger. Then she spoke, words flowing with painful clarity. "I hid behind the trash bins because I didn't know where else to go. I saw shadows moving, loud voices shouting. And Ranger, he was there. He barked, but not to attack me. He barked to help me. He tried to pull away from the officer to reach me, and I could feel him wanting to save me." Ranger shifted again, stepping slightly toward Riley, ignoring the handler's desperate attempts to pull him back. The German Shepherd's behavior confirmed every word Riley had spoken. Every adult in the room could see it. The dog's instincts, refined by years of training, were guided not by authority, but by memory and loyalty. The child's testimony had become undeniable, and the courtroom collectively understood that months of official reports might have been misdirected or even falsified. The jurors' eyes were wide, some covering their mouths in shock. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing the details of a story unfolding with the authenticity of memory and instinct. Deputies whispered among themselves, realizing the implications. The narrative that had been presented in official reports was contradicted by two undeniable witnesses, a child and a dog. The tension in the room became palpable, a mix of awe, disbelief, and the quiet recognition that something extraordinary was happening. Riley continued, her small frame trembling slightly but her voice unwavering. "He barked to protect me. I know he wanted to get to me, but the officer pulled him back. I think the officer was scared of what would happen if anyone knew what really happened. But Ranger remembered me. He remembered that night. He tried to help me. He tried to save me." The courtroom went silent. Even the murmurs of spectators had ceased. All eyes were fixed on the extraordinary tableau. A child and a dog, their memories converging to reveal a hidden truth. The defense attorney finally spoke, his voice wavering. "Your Honor, the child may be mistaken. This dog is trained. He could not have acted in such a manner." The judge raised a hand, firm and deliberate. "The objection is noted. However, the child's testimony remains valid and relevant. Please allow her to continue." The tension was almost unbearable. Every adult in the courtroom knew that the events Riley was describing, corroborated by the dog's behavior, had the potential to rewrite the entire story. Riley nodded and continued, recounting the sequence of events as best as her memory allowed. "I saw the man coming toward me. Ranger barked, stepped forward, tried to reach me. He wanted to protect me, but the officer pulled him back. I hid as best I could, but I knew he was there. I knew Ranger was trying to save me. I think he still remembers me." She looked down briefly, clutching her fox tightly, and then glanced up. Ranger's eyes met hers, soft yet intense. The bond was undeniable. The courtroom was captivated. The jurors, the spectators, the reporters, and even the law enforcement officers could feel the gravity of what was unfolding. Ranger's obedience had been challenged by instinct and memory, validating Riley's recollection of a night filled with fear, confusion, and unseen courage. No one could deny the truth that lay in the alignment of child and dog. The courtroom had become a vessel for revelation, and every adult present recognized that the narrative they had relied upon was now fragile. Riley's aunt wept quietly, her hands clasped together as she watched her niece. She had hoped for safety, for a small voice to be heard, but she had never anticipated the courage, clarity, and precision with which Riley would recount the events. She could feel the weight of the moment, the profound truth of a child's memory intersecting with the instinct of a loyal dog, and she knew that nothing in the courtroom would ever be the same. The judge observed Ranger closely. The German Shepherd's body language, the subtle movements, the whine that escaped his throat, all spoke louder than any testimony filed in reports. Ranger had remembered. He had tried to save Riley, and now he was confirming what no human witness could. The implications were staggering. The official narrative, long assumed correct, was being challenged by memory and instinct, untainted by ego, protocol, or fear. The handler's hands were trembling. He tugged again on the leash, but Ranger resisted. The dog's loyalty, long directed at authority, had shifted to the child, and he would not be swayed. The courtroom collectively sensed the tension. The story of that night, obscured by authority and paperwork, was now being revealed in living proof. Riley's courage, paired with Ranger's instinct, had brought the hidden truth into the light. "Ranger tried to protect me," Riley whispered once more, her voice carrying a mix of fear and certainty. "He barked to warn me, to guide me, to keep me safe. He wanted to reach me. He remembers, and I remember him." The courtroom was silent, every adult present feeling the weight of her words. The smallest witness, a 6-year-old child, had revealed what no adult testimony could, and the loyal dog by her side confirmed every word. The stage was set for revelation that would shake the foundations of the case. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling for a brief pause. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, the air thick with the realization that months of testimony, reports, and assumed authority were now secondary to the undeniable bond between child and dog. Riley's story had taken center stage, a living, breathing truth that could not be dismissed. Ranger, silent yet expressive, remained beside her, confirming what she had already revealed. That night had been one of courage, protection, and hidden heroism. And in that quiet moment, the courtroom understood something profound. The truth had not been lost, only overlooked. Riley's courage and Ranger's loyalty had unearthed a reality no report could capture. The next steps would unravel the narrative further, exposing layers of fear, deception, and the unwavering instinct of a dog who remembered a child he had tried to protect. This was no ordinary case. It had become a revelation, driven by memory, instinct, and the bravery of the smallest witness. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, almost tangible. Every eye remained locked on Riley Dawson and Ranger, the 6-year-old and the powerful German shepherd who had rewritten the narrative of the night in a way no one could have predicted. Even seasoned officers, lawyers, and reporters felt a chill, a recognition that they were witnessing a moment that defied ordinary explanation. Ranger's presence was more than symbolic. It was proof. The dog's unwavering focus on Riley confirmed every detail she had courageously shared, and no argument, no report, no testimony could counter the living evidence before them. Riley's small fingers clutched her stuffed fox, the only anchor in a room suddenly charged with tension and revelation. "He tried to get to me," she said quietly, almost to herself, her gaze flicking toward Ranger. "I know he remembers. He wanted to protect me even when the officer held him back." Her words, simple but deliberate, carried a weight that rippled across the room. The dog tilted his head, letting out a soft whine, an echo of understanding and confirmation. The room held its collective breath, suspended between disbelief and awe. The judge, who had witnessed countless testimonies in his career, leaned forward on the bench, studying the unusual interaction between child and dog. "Riley," he said carefully, "explain everything you recall about the events that night. Speak slowly. The court is listening." The request was procedural, but the gravity of it was extraordinary. Riley inhaled deeply, recalling the fear, the shadows, the chaos, and the unexpected courage that had propelled her through the night. She was about to reveal the moments that no adult testimony had captured. "I was hiding behind the trash bins," she began, her voice steadying. "I didn't know where else to go. I heard shouting and saw shadows moving. The man who was supposed to be caught, he was coming toward me. Ranger, he was there. He barked at him, but he wasn't attacking. He was trying to protect me. He tried to reach me, but the officer pulled him back. I remember feeling safe when he was near, even though everything else was scary." Her words were raw, honest, and hauntingly precise. Ranger shifted slightly, pressing closer to her side. The handler tugged on the leash again, but the dog resisted, refusing to obey. The courtroom gasped softly. Even the most experienced law enforcement officers had never witnessed a dog defy command in such a precise, meaningful way. Ranger's instincts had chosen Riley over authority, loyalty over obedience, and memory over training. Every adult present understood that the dog's behavior was unassailable evidence of the child's account. The defense attorney's face had gone pale. He whispered frantically to his client, but his words seemed futile. Ranger's actions, paired with Riley's testimony, undermined the official reports, suggesting not just error but intentional misrepresentation. The prosecution leaned forward, urgently conferring with each other, quickly recalibrating their approach. The story they had thought was straightforward, an incident of pursuit and control, was unraveling in real time, reshaped by the courage of a 6-year-old girl and the instincts of a loyal dog. Riley's aunt, seated behind her, whispered softly, tears brimming in her eyes. She had always known Riley was brave, but she had never imagined the depth of her niece's courage and clarity. The girl's small frame held an authority the courtroom could not ignore. Every word she spoke added another layer to the story, revealing the overlooked truth of that night, a truth that had eluded all adult witnesses and reports. Ranger's silent affirmation made the revelation impossible to dismiss. I think he remembers me," Riley said, her voice barely above a whisper but full of certainty. "He remembers that night. He tried to save me even when the officer tried to stop him. He wanted me to be safe. He protected me." Ranger leaned his massive head gently against her shoulder, a physical echo of her words. The courtroom felt the gravity of the moment. This was not mere testimony. It was a living, breathing account of events confirmed by instinct and memory. The jurors shifted uneasily, whispering quietly among themselves. The implications of what they were witnessing were staggering. Reports and official statements were now under scrutiny. The narrative presented in the months leading up to this trial seemed insufficient, perhaps intentionally misleading. Ranger's behavior, combined with Riley's unwavering account, challenged the very foundation of the case. The truth had been hidden, but it was now emerging with clarity that no one could ignore. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling a pause. "Let's proceed carefully," he said, his tone measured. "Riley, take your time. We need your full account." Riley nodded, closing her eyes briefly, drawing strength from Ranger's presence. She recalled the sounds, the fear, the shadows, and the sudden, inexplicable comfort she had felt when the dog had appeared. Then she spoke again, her voice gaining confidence with each word. "He barked to warn me," Riley said. "He wasn't attacking anyone. He barked to help me, to guide me, to make sure I was safe. I hid as best I could, but I knew Ranger was there. I knew he wanted to protect me. I think he remembers that moment, too." Ranger's low whine was soft yet insistent, as if confirming her memory in real time. The courtroom absorbed the significance. A child's recollection corroborated by instinctive behavior in a trained police dog was more compelling than any written report. The defense attorney finally tried to regain control. "Your Honor, the child is mistaken. This dog cannot act independently of its handler. This testimony is unreliable." But the judge's gaze was firm. "Objection noted. Testimony continues. The child's observations and the dog's behavior are relevant and compelling. Proceed, Riley." The courtroom held its breath, recognizing the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding. This was no ordinary testimony. It was a revelation, a living account of courage and instinct intertwined. Riley looked down briefly, gripping her fox, then glanced back at Ranger. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, "but when he was there, I felt like I could breathe. He tried to protect me. He wanted me to be safe. He wasn't attacking anyone. He was trying to save me." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even the spectators, used to drama and spectacle, sensed the profound reality of the moment. They were witnessing memory and instinct converging, to reveal a hidden truth no human account could fully capture. Ranger's body shifted closer to Riley, his massive head resting near her small shoulder. The dog's posture radiated loyalty, protection, and recognition. The handler tugged desperately, but Ranger's focus was unbreakable. Every adult in the room understood. This was living testimony, beyond words, beyond reports. The dog's actions validated Riley's recollection of the night, revealing a truth that had been overlooked, suppressed, or ignored. The judge leaned back slightly, studying the interaction. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, almost to himself. Ranger's behavior, combined with Riley's testimony, provides insight that no document can. We will proceed carefully, but the court recognizes the significance of these observations. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, caught in the weight of a revelation that challenged authority, expectations, and preconceived notions. Riley's aunt wept quietly, her hands clasped over her mouth. She knew that her niece had uncovered something remarkable, a truth long buried, now coming to light through courage, clarity, and the instinct of a loyal dog. The courtroom, witnesses, and jurors alike sensed the importance. The official narrative was being questioned in real time, replaced by a living, undeniable account. Every adult present felt the tension, the awe, and the quiet thrill of witnessing a hidden truth emerge. Riley continued, her voice steady and determined. "He barked to warn me, to keep me safe, to make sure I wasn't hurt. He tried to reach me even when the officer held him back. He remembers. I remember him. And I know he tried to save me." Ranger let out a low, mournful whine, pressing closer. The courtroom could no longer deny what was happening. The child's memory and the dog's instincts converged into proof, undeniable and compelling. The jurors, spectators, and reporters held their collective breath. The courtroom had become a stage for a truth that transcended legal procedure. Riley's courage and Ranger's loyalty were now the center of attention, a force so powerful that no argument, report, or testimony could challenge it. The story of that night, long clouded by human error and oversight, was finally being told with clarity and confirmation. And in that suspended moment, every adult in the room understood something profound. The smallest witness, paired with a loyal dog, had illuminated a truth that authority, protocol, and reports could not obscure. The revelation was far from complete, and yet the courtroom sensed that nothing would ever be the same again. The events of that night were coming to light, and Riley, with Ranger by her side, was the key to uncovering a hidden reality that had long been ignored. The courtroom remained suspended in a tense, almost sacred silence. Riley Dawson's small frame stood firm, her eyes wide and unflinching, and Ranger, the massive German shepherd, pressed loyally against her side, a living testament to the events of that night. Every adult present, judges, jurors, attorneys, law enforcement officers, and spectators, felt the gravity of what was unfolding. The room had transformed into a stage for truth, courage, and instinct, where the innocence of a child intersected with the discipline of a dog to expose a reality long buried beneath human error and oversight. Riley took a deep breath, her small hands clutching her stuffed fox like a talisman. "I saw him," she said, her voice quivering with a mixture of fear and determination. "The man who was supposed to hurt me. He was big, he was shouting, and he came straight for me. I hid behind the dumpsters, but I could hear him moving. Ranger, he was there. He barked at him, but not to hurt him. He was trying to help me. He was trying to protect me." The words, simple yet vivid, hung in the air with an almost tangible weight. Ranger shifted slightly, pressing his massive head closer to Riley's shoulder. The handler tugged weakly at the leash, but Ranger ignored him completely. Every adult in the courtroom could see the subtle signals, the dog's unwavering focus, the low, soft whines, the protective stance. Ranger's loyalty had shifted from authority to instinct, choosing to stand by Riley in defiance of command. It was an extraordinary, undeniable display, and the room collectively held its breath. The judge leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands, eyes fixed on the child and the dog. "Riley, please continue," he said softly, his voice carrying both authority and encouragement. "Tell us everything you remember about that night. Every detail matters." Riley nodded, closing her eyes for a moment as she recalled the fear, the shadows, and the sudden, almost miraculous appearance of Ranger. Then she spoke again, her words carrying clarity that belied her age. "He barked to warn me," she said, her voice steadying. "He wanted me to be safe. He tried to reach me, but the officer held him back. I could feel him trying to get to me, trying to protect me. I hid, but I knew he was there. I knew he wanted to help. I think he remembers me. I think he remembers that night." Ranger let out a low, mournful whine, his massive head nudging her gently, confirming every word. The courtroom felt the weight of the revelation settle around them like a heavy fog. The defense attorney's hands shook. "Your Honor, this is extraordinary. The child may be mistaken. The dog cannot act independently of training." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Objection noted. However, the child's testimony and the dog's behavior are highly relevant. Proceed." The room seemed to lean forward collectively, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Riley had become the conduit of truth, and Ranger's instincts were the undeniable corroboration. Riley's aunt whispered softly, tears streaming down her face. She could barely believe what her niece was revealing, yet the dog's behavior left no room for doubt. The child's memory, precise and vivid, combined with Ranger's instinctive confirmation, exposed a truth that had been overlooked, suppressed, or misrepresented. Every adult in the courtroom felt the tension, the awe, and the quiet thrill of witnessing a hidden reality surface. Riley took another deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling with a mixture of fear and determination. He barked at the man to stop him from getting to me. He wasn't attacking. He was trying to guide me to safety. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to protect me. He tried to reach me even when the officer held him back. I remember feeling safe when he was near, even though everything else was scary. Ranger leaned closer, pressing his body against hers in a protective gesture that made the courtroom collectively gasp. The jurors exchanged tense, incredulous glances. The official narrative, built on reports and sworn testimony, was unraveling before their very eyes. Ranger's instinctive behavior, combined with Riley's recollection, presented a story that no paperwork could replicate. The courtroom, once a theater of procedure and authority, had become a stage for revelation, where the truth of a terrifying night was emerging through courage and loyalty. The prosecution scribbled notes furiously, trying to reconcile Riley's testimony with the existing reports. Deputies whispered urgently, realizing that the events as reported did not match the child's account, nor did they align with the dog's instinctive actions. Even seasoned officers felt a pang of disbelief, understanding that the child and the dog were presenting a version of events more compelling than any official record. Riley's voice gained strength. "He remembered me. He remembered that I was scared. He tried to protect me. He wanted to help me. He didn't want anyone to know, but I know he tried." Ranger's low whine echoed through the courtroom, a living testament to her words. The subtle gestures, the nudge, the lean, the protective stance, confirmed every detail she recounted. The room was captivated, the gravity of the moment pressing on every adult present. The defense attorney tried to regain control, whispering frantically to the handler. "He's acting on instinct, not fact. You can't claim this proves anything." But Ranger ignored every command, his attention unwavering. The dog's instinctive loyalty to Riley overrode years of training, authority, and expectation. The courtroom collectively recognized the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing, a child and a dog unveiling a hidden truth no adult had previously acknowledged. Riley's aunt whispered softly, "You're doing amazing, sweetie. Just tell them everything." Riley nodded, her small hand brushing against Ranger's massive paw. She recalled every detail, the fear, the shadows, the barking, and the subtle guidance the dog had provided that had allowed her to survive. She spoke again, her words precise and unwavering. "He tried to protect me. He barked to warn me. He wanted me to be safe. He tried to get to me even when the officer held him back. I remember it all. I know he remembers too. He tried to save me." Ranger leaned his head against her shoulder, his body radiating loyalty and protection. The courtroom felt the truth settle around them, undeniable, living, and unassailable. The judge adjusted his glasses, observing Ranger's posture and Riley's recounting. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "The child's testimony and the dog's behavior provide insight that no report or sworn statement could. We will proceed carefully, but it is clear that these observations are of profound relevance." The courtroom collectively held its breath, the tension thickening, as the hidden truth began to crystallize before their eyes. Riley's courage and Ranger's loyalty had shifted the balance of perception. No longer could the courtroom rely solely on documents, reports, or adult testimony. A living narrative built on instinct, memory, and bravery had emerged. The audience, jurors, and officers all sensed the transformative moment. The hidden truth was rising, undeniable, and powerful. The defense attorney slumped slightly, whispering desperately, but Ranger remained resolute, steadfast by Riley's side. The child's account and the dog's behavior were now inseparable, a dual testimony of events long concealed. Every adult in the courtroom felt the gravity of the moment. The ordinary had been shattered by courage and instinct, revealing a truth no one could ignore. Riley's aunt wept quietly, her heart swelling with pride and fear. Her niece, so small and yet so formidable, had revealed a hidden reality with clarity and bravery. Ranger, silent yet expressive, confirmed every word. The courtroom had become a stage for a revelation that transcended procedure, authority, and expectation. The next moments would unearth more, exposing the truth that had been buried for far too long. Riley took one final breath, her voice strong and unwavering. He barked to warn me. He tried to protect me. He wanted me to be safe. He remembers, I remember him, and I know he tried to save me. Ranger let out a final, low whine, nudging her gently. The courtroom was silent, every adult present feeling the weight of her words. The revelation had been made, but its implications were only beginning to unfold. In that moment, everyone understood something profound. The smallest witness, paired with a loyal dog, had illuminated a truth that authority, procedure, and reports could not obscure. The child's courage, coupled with Ranger's instinct, had shattered assumptions, challenged narratives, and forced the courtroom to confront reality in its rawest, most undeniable form. The hidden truth was no longer hidden. It had arrived, alive and undeniable, in the most extraordinary testimony any of them had ever witnessed. The courtroom remained in an almost reverent silence as Riley Dawson stood, small but unyielding, her hand brushing against Ranger's massive head. Every adult present felt the tension, the weight of truth, and the unmistakable power of the bond between child and dog. Months of reports, testimonies, and assumptions now seemed fragile in comparison to this living evidence. The jurors, spectators, and officers were collectively aware that they were witnessing a moment that would change the outcome of the case and redefine their understanding of courage, loyalty, and truth. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying Riley carefully, then glanced at Ranger. "We have seen extraordinary testimony today," he said, his voice deliberate. "The court recognizes the gravity of the events as recounted by Riley Dawson and as evidenced by Ranger's actions. We will proceed to uncover the full truth." Every eye in the courtroom stayed fixed on the pair, child and dog, as if the two of them alone now held the scales of justice in balance. Riley's voice, small yet steady, broke the silence. "He tried to protect me," she said, her gaze meeting Ranger. "He barked to warn me. He wanted me to be safe. He tried to get to me even when the officer held him back. I know he remembers. I know he tried." Ranger leaned closer, nuzzling her shoulder. The sound of his low whine was soft yet resonant, confirming every detail she had revealed. The courtroom collectively shivered at the profound clarity and courage emanating from this unlikely duo. The defense attorney, visibly shaken, whispered urgently to his client. This could destroy the case. The child and the dog, no jury could ignore this. We need to rethink our strategy." But even as he spoke, the truth was evident. Ranger's instinctive loyalty, paired with Riley's vivid recollection, had created evidence no one could fabricate, twist, or misrepresent. The narrative had shifted completely. The prosecution leaned forward, exchanging tense glances. They realized that what they were witnessing was more than testimony. It was a revelation, a demonstration of hidden truths emerging from fear, memory, and courage. The courtroom, once a venue for standard procedure, had become an arena of extraordinary insight, where the innocence of a child and the instinct of a dog revealed what paperwork and adult testimony could not. Riley took a deep breath and continued, her voice gaining strength. He barked to warn me, to protect me, and to guide me. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted me safe. He tried to reach me, even when the officer tried to stop him. I remember everything. I know he remembers too. Ranger's gaze never wavered. His posture was protective, loyal, and undeniable. The courtroom absorbed every nuance, the quiet energy of truth radiating from this pair in a way no human testimony alone could achieve. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling a brief pause. This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances. The child's testimony, coupled with the dog's behavior, provides critical insight into the events of that night. We will proceed to examine the implications. Every adult present felt the tension, the awe, and the understanding that the narrative of the case had fundamentally shifted. What had been hidden was now undeniable. Riley's aunt whispered softly, tears streaming down her face. "You're amazing, sweetie. You've shown them the truth." Riley nodded, her small hand brushing Ranger's massive paw. The bond between them radiated trust, memory, and courage. The courtroom, witnesses, and jurors all recognized that the official reports had failed to capture the reality of the night. Ranger's instinct and Riley's recollection were now the foundation of truth. Riley's testimony continued with precision. "He remembered me. He tried to help me. He barked to warn me and protect me. He wanted me to be safe. He didn't want anyone to know, but I know he tried." Ranger leaned closer, his massive head resting near her shoulder, a living testament to the words she spoke. Every adult in the courtroom felt the power of the moment. The truth had emerged, undeniable, living, and profound. The jurors whispered among themselves, understanding the implications. Reports, testimonies, and statements were no longer the sole measure of truth. A child and a dog had revealed the reality of the night in a way that defied conventional understanding. Even seasoned officers felt the weight of the revelation. This was more than a case. It was a story of courage, instinct, and loyalty that no one could ignore. The defense attorney slumped in his chair, whispering urgently, "We can't argue against this. It's undeniable. The child and the dog, they prove everything." The prosecution nodded silently, acknowledging the shift. Every adult in the courtroom recognized that authority, procedure, and written reports had been challenged by a living, breathing narrative, and no one could deny the truth. Riley took another deep breath and stepped slightly closer to Ranger. "He tried to protect me. He tried to help me. He barked to warn me. He remembers that night. He remembers me. I remember him. And I know he tried." Ranger's low whine, almost imperceptible, was a gentle but unmistakable affirmation. The courtroom collectively exhaled, the tension still heavy, yet tempered with recognition of the courage and clarity displayed by the smallest witness and the loyal dog. The judge nodded slowly, leaning forward. "The court acknowledges that the events recounted by Riley Dawson, corroborated by Ranger's behavior, reveal a previously hidden truth. The evidence presented today will be considered in full. This case is no longer solely a matter of reports or testimony. It is a matter of revealed fact, courage, and instinct." The weight of the statement pressed over the courtroom like a tangible force. Riley's aunt whispered through tears, "You did it, sweetie. You showed them the truth." Riley smiled faintly, her hand brushing against Ranger's paw, feeling the warmth and loyalty radiating from the massive dog. Every adult in the courtroom understood that what they had witnessed was extraordinary. A young girl and a dog unveiling a truth long obscured, reshaping the course of justice through memory, courage, and instinct. Riley's small voice continued, steady and unwavering. "He barked to warn me, to protect me, to guide me. I could feel him trying to help me even when the officer held him back. He remembers, I remember. And I know he tried to save me." Ranger pressed closer, the dog's loyalty undeniable. The courtroom absorbed every word, every gesture, every confirmation. The hidden truth had been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same. The judge tapped his gavel, signaling a long pause. "We will proceed with a full review of the case, taking into account the testimony and actions presented today. The court recognizes that the truth has emerged in a way no prior reports captured. This revelation will be central to determining the outcome." The room seemed to vibrate with acknowledgement. The narrative had shifted, Authority had been challenged, and the courage of a child paired with a loyal dog had altered the course of justice. Riley's aunt wept quietly, holding her hands together. She had hoped for safety, but she had never imagined the depth of courage and clarity her niece would display. Riley had not only spoken, she had revealed a hidden truth confirmed by instinct and loyalty. Every adult in the courtroom recognized the extraordinary moment, understanding that nothing in procedure, authority, or previous testimony could outweigh what they had witnessed. Riley glanced at Ranger, who rested his massive head against her shoulder. "We did it," she whispered softly. Ranger let out a low whine in response, and the courtroom collectively understood the unspoken truth. A bond, memory, and instinct had unveiled what had been hidden for far too long. The room was silent, yet filled with awe, tension, and the profound recognition of courage and loyalty. The judge's voice broke the quiet. "The court will take all measures to ensure the truth is honored and justice is served." This testimony, corroborated by undeniable actions, changes everything. The jurors nodded, reporters scribbled, and officers exchanged quiet, incredulous glances. The story of that night, once clouded by fear, assumptions, and incomplete reports, had finally emerged in full clarity, thanks to a courageous child and a loyal police dog. As Riley's aunt gathered her into a hug, tears flowing freely, the courtroom erupted into a quiet murmuring, a shared acknowledgement of the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. Ranger pressed close, a living shield of loyalty and recognition, confirming every word, every memory, and every emotion. The hidden truth had not only been revealed, it had triumphed. Riley looked up one final time, her eyes meeting Ranger. "Thank you for protecting me," she whispered. The dog responded with a soft nuzzle, and the courtroom collectively felt the resonance of loyalty, courage, and memory. This was justice delivered not only through procedure but through instinct, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a dog. The judge banged his gavel one final time. "This court acknowledges the bravery, clarity, and truth revealed today. Justice will proceed with these revelations in full consideration." The courtroom exhaled, a mix of relief, awe, and recognition. The narrative had shifted irreversibly, and the hidden truth had emerged victorious. In that moment, Riley Dawson and Ranger became more than witnesses. They became symbols of courage, loyalty, and the power of truth. The courtroom, forever changed, had witnessed something extraordinary. Authority and reports had been challenged. Fear had been confronted, and hidden truths had been illuminated by the smallest voice and the most loyal companion. Justice, finally, was ready to follow.